be back in Auckland after quite a few years away. I'm Tali. I run the solution engineering team for APAC at LaunchDarkly. And I've started my career in tech in 2003, which gives me pause every time I stop to calculate the actual number of years, so we're not going to talk about that. And what I am going to talk to you about today is how you can go faster and be safer. And we'll talk about release velocity, psychological safety, and finish with a magic show. So let's get on with it. I just need that to cooperate. Okay. So when was the last time you tried riding a bicycle, or whether if you're a parent, did you teach one of your kids to ride a bicycle? And I'm pretty sure that at some point you're either yelling that or somebody's yelling at you, you gotta pedal faster if you want to stay upright. And as a kid, it makes absolutely no sense, because as a kid, you know that if you go faster, you are more likely to fall. And you've probably known by now that the higher you fall from, the more painful it's going to be. So it really requires like a leap of faith for you to be able to start pedaling faster and hoping that you stay upright. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I'll start by addressing fear. So what are we scared of when we think about going faster? And all of us as people are scared of failure, and businesses as well are scared of failure. So nobody wants to be releasing a feature that doesn't work or causes harm or just fails. And for many years, the approach was, well, if you're going to be really scared of making mistakes, if mistakes are going to cost you a lot, then you'll be extra careful and you'll avoid mistakes. But we all know that doesn't work like that, really, because mistakes are unavoidable. And in recent times, we're talking more about psychological safety. So having the ability to support people as they try new things, as they take risks, and they make mistakes. But when we make a mistake, which eventually happens, we spend the time on learning from those mistakes instead of shifting and pointing blame. Another thing that a lot of organizations are afraid of is stasis, is a lack of innovation. And when you have fear in place, yes, innovation is the first things that actually suffers, because nobody wants to try new things if you get into trouble. And then organizations find themselves in a situation where there's not enough innovation happening, there's not enough risk-taking, no new initiatives, and it leads to a stasis. And then if you combine the both of fear of making changes and then getting stuck in a situation where there's no innovation, you can get to a place where you just get beaten, whether it's by the competition, whether it's by changing market conditions. So I think the last 2-3 years with COVID has been a great example of that. It's been a few months or like a year that I probably had 3, 4, 5 conversations every week with prospects, with organizations that have been doing business in a certain way, whether it's a brick and mortar shops that had to adjust really quickly and come up with an online presence, whether this is like government agencies that suddenly had to cater for millions of users. They're looking for them for answers and for quick updates. And everybody had to change what they were doing or just be left behind. So how does going faster help? And before I'll talk about strategies, let's define what I mean by going fast. And when I talk about going fast in the context of this talk, I'm talking about deploying changes and deploying features and testing them constantly. So being able to quickly deploy something, test it, make sure that it works. And deploying faster and moving faster is important. But another thing to remember is that you gotta move as fast as your customers are moving. So you will have customers that are ready to accept changes in a very rapid rate, but then you have customers that are not as agile, are not as open to changes, and they do need to work really hard to adopt any change. So I think one of the extreme examples is the US Army, for example. Every time that they release a new product, you gotta train the whole force. It's a lot of effort. So you gotta move as fast as your customers are willing to move with you. And that brings me to safe. Ideally, when you release a new feature, when you test a new capability, the worst you want it to do is like be neutral. Don't cause any harm. Obviously, you want it to do better, you want to improve your business metrics, you want to improve revenue, you want to improve customer engagement, but at least it shouldn't harm any of these. So when I talk about safe deployments, I talk about deployments that do not cause any harm, that do not aggravate your users. And that brings me to maybe the most important slide, apart from the magic show, of course, in my presentation here, and it is that deployment is not a release. And it's a very important concept to think about. Deployment is the act of taking your code from one place to another, whether it's from development into testing. It's moving your code from place to place. Release is a business decision. It has costs, it has implications. It's the first time that your users are seeing this new functionality that you release, and it is a very big decision. And being able to separate deployment from release is something that LaunchDarkly has been working with our customers on. And that gives you the ability to let your development run as fast as they want, continuously deploy, continuously test, continuously improve, and then give the business the power to decide, okay, this is the time for the release. This is moving at the pace of our customers. This means that the release is fast, is safe, is in line with the market conditions, and gives them the independence to take these decisions themselves. So let's talk about strategies. Now that we've talked about deploying, separating deployment from releases and talked about safe and fast deployments, let's talk about different strategies that we can implement to stay more faster but still be safe. And the first strategy is decreasing the deltas. So I've started in tech in 2003, and at that time we were using waterfall model. So you would develop for a year or 2 years, and then you have maybe a yearly release. And if it went really bad, you had a half-yearly release. And if it was really, really bad, then you had a half, a quarter, and 2 patches on top, and your customers were really, really annoyed. But this such a big delta also introduces a lot of risks. I think you can think about maybe gambling, which is a good example. If you play the penny slots or like the poker machines, you put in coins, and you will need to make a really good effort to lose $1,000 in this way. Like, you have to really invest yourself in that. But if you go into a blackjack table and you bet on a $1,000 in one go, you're more likely to lose it. So the similar strategy, you decrease the delta of the release that you introduce, allows you to make smaller bets, allows you to reduce the risk in every bet that you take. And that also opens the way to course correction. Does anyone know how autopilot works in high level? Any pilots here? Good, I'm very glad there's no pilots here, because I've been in a few discussions that were very, very long. In general, so on Monday I flew from Sydney to Auckland. So when you go onto the plane, you put the pilot, I would assume, would put the coordinates for Auckland on the autopilot system. Now, the plane itself does not run in a linear trajectory. It goes in a certain direction, but then there's wind, and there's pressure, and there's weather system, and whatnot. And all these will change the course of the plane. And what the autopilot system does is actually make these small changes to keep the plane on course, so I don't end up in Hawaii instead of Auckland. And these changes are very small. You don't notice them as you sit on board the plane. I would assume any one of us will not be very appreciative if the plane just goes whooshed onto the right side or something. And similarly, there's a very well-known example from eBay from the late 90s, I believe. So eBay, when they first released, they had their platform, the background was bright yellow, like yellow. And you can look it up, it's a really interesting story. So the background was really yellow, and then at some point they decided that the best design would be to have a white background. It's nicer, it's cleaner, and whatnot. And they changed it overnight. And the users were furious. It's like, you won't believe how users got furious from changing the color from yellow to white. And they didn't want to just abandon this initiative, because they thought that the white background would look better. So what they've done is they started with it, they rolled back to yellow, but then over time, they gradually reduced the saturation of the yellow all the way to white. And nobody even noticed that happened. So now it's white, and that's course correction. Now, we talked about course correction. When you release something, you want it to be able to answer honest questions. So it's not enough to release something out to production. You want to know how well it is going, what metrics it is returning, what data is being captured. Are you still thinking back, are you safe? Are you harming the business? Are you harming the users, or are you improving on your metrics, or at least not damaging them? And releasing something that has no metrics and does not report anything is pretty risky. Again, those of you who are parents like me know that the most dangerous time of the day is when the kids are quiet. You know that the house is about to go on fire. So similarly with your applications, you want them to report happily, you want them to return metrics, so you know what's going on. I want to sum the different aspects I've talked about in this survey we ran with the Wakefield Research Institute, and that covered around 400 software professionals that are using feature management systems, not just LaunchDarkly, any feature management. And one of the questions we asked is like, what are your top reasons to use feature flags? And the two overwhelming reasons were risk mitigation and deployment stability. So addressing all these concepts that I've just reviewed. And that brings me to some use cases and examples of how you could use feature flags to obtain those goals that I've just mentioned. The first thing that you can do with feature flags is deploy broken code. And I know not everybody likes the idea, but if you want to move progressively, if you want to deploy continuously, you got to get used to working in shorter feature branches and short-lived feature branches, and you want to think about trunk-based development. And you cannot do that without deploying broken code. So what you're going to do, you're going to develop your features behind the flag, and those features are always hidden behind the flag. So everybody's developing their features and everybody's hiding their features behind flags. So if I check in code, if I commit code that's not working or still needs more testing, I do not affect anybody else because I'm the only one that can control this flag. So not everybody's showing the changes all the time, and that allows for trunk-based development and other practices. Testing production is also a big topic, and I come from a background of testing, so for me, testing production was like, no, not going to do that. But when you think about it, if you think about the cost of finding bugs in different stages, we've all seen this exponential curve where you find a defect in unit testing or very close to coding, the cost of fixing it is X. When it goes around to testing, it will be, I don't remember, maybe 10X. And when it goes to your users, it's like 100X at least to fix it, because you need to redeploy, you need to do fixes, you have damage and all that. So testing production can really help in closing this gap of costs when you find defects. And a great example I've read recently was about Microsoft. So Microsoft Office were releasing a product every 3 years in the past. So there was 2 years of development and 1 year of testing, which is huge effort. And they wanted to move to a monthly more agile release. And they've done that by utilizing testing production. Because when you test in production, you can test a very small percentage of your users. And if you measure your code correctly, if you put in the right metrics, you can know very quickly if something went very, very wrong. Like, you don't have to release to 100% of the users to know that the page load time has gone crazy. You can detect this on 1% if you're Microsoft, maybe a larger percent if you don't have that many concurrent users. And it is a great way to understand immediately if something has gone wrong with your release, if something has gone wrong with the feature, if there are any hidden bugs. And the benefit of that is that you know about these bugs before your users knows and start slamming you on Twitter or whatever platform that they are using. Feature flags also allow you to deliver in stages. Instead of blasting your whole user base, you can release a feature to those customers who love getting new features and love getting feedback and providing feedback. You don't have to release a feature immediately to customers who are less likely to use it quickly. You can monitor your risk, you can control your risk and decide maybe you want to do a beta program. Maybe you want to release something in phases every few days and collect your metrics. So again, it reduces drastically the risk in deploying to everybody in one go. When you are developing user feature flags, you can also turn off a part of the release. So when you use feature flags, you actually try to break them down, to break your functionality and features down in a way that you can control, ideally, features individually. You might have a bigger release that you're releasing, and that will be compound of multiple features. And then the ability to control them separately allows you to turn off just the things that don't work. So if you release 10 features and one of them is really bad for your metrics, you can turn it off and let the others run. So it's not an all or nothing bet. And most importantly, it allows you to do a rapid rollback, because life happens and sometimes bad things happen, and sometimes we release something that is really, really bad and doesn't work, and we want it hidden really fast. And you can do that by going in and turning off a feature, and without a rollback, without a costly redeployment or patch forward. It gives you back time to understand, one, what went wrong, and then to quickly fix it. So that gets me to the TLDR or TLRT if you're reading Twitter, or if not banning Twitter. If you want to release often, which I'm assuming most of us do, being in this conference, you want to make it safer and less scary. And something that also came up is in our survey around stress in deployment is, hope you can see that, but causes of stress that are listed by the different by the participants in this survey, and I'll read them out because it's really tiny. So the top cause for stress is worried about bugs that escaped testing, which is what you do with testing production. You can mitigate that. Real-life use might not match pre-launch expectations. So by doing gradual rollout, you can start touching base with your customers earlier. You can run things like A/B testing. You can start collecting information and feedback before you release everything to everyone. And if you do that in a small enough increments, you are able to also change direction if you need to. And then other concerns are around time it takes to fix errors, time to redeploy, and time to roll back, which again is something that can be mitigated with feature flags. And the right side of this chart shows how people are feeling about their releases in general when using feature management systems. And you can see that 9% or 19% for LaunchDarkly customers, they are not at all stressed. So I'm really happy for those folks. But the majority, the 56%, are reporting that are only a little stressed, and in general, they are reporting that there is much less stress around feature deployments, which is really great to hear, because this is one of the things that we set up as a company to do. So our founders have both been developers, and they've seen firsthand the pain in deploying and staying up all night and staying up on a Friday night to be able to deploy changes. And one of our aims as the company for LaunchDarkly is to reduce this stress and let developers effectively run and manage their feature releases. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, my little magic show, so magic with flags. For this magic trick, you will need your phone if you want to participate. And I will ask you to scan this QR code here. And I promise this is not Rickrolling. I'm not going to install anything. It's just a GitHub page that I'm running with a demo. And you should have this little, our little mascot toggle up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a few more seconds to get that. And what I'm going to do now is do a quick change and tell me, what color do you see on your toggle now? I see purple, I see blue here. Blue, there's some purples in there. So what I'm actually doing in this little magic trick is I am able to, in real time, see whether your phone is an Android or an iPhone, and based on the operating system, will show a different color. And if you want to talk more about how we do that and how we do other things or anything else LaunchDarkly, you're most welcome to stop by our booth, and we have a draw for a drone or headphones, I can't remember. So please come by and let's have a discussion. Thank you.